By the time I was 12, I realised I had to let it all go. If I didn't, I was just going to be angry with my father all the time. Yeah. And that anger with my father would define my life. I would make choices, decisions, all sorts of things based around it. And I didn't want to do that anymore. Yeah. So I had to go through this process. Let myself go through a process. It's a very important thing. And at that age I learnt the importance of forgiveness. But I also learnt what was involved. I learnt that you couldn't fake it. You couldn't push through it. You couldn't intellectualise yourself into a place where you think you've forgiven. You couldn't make it better when it wasn't better at all. You couldn't avoid the results of everything that occurred. You couldn't. And I also realised that once you'd forgiven somebody, that didn't mean that they would change. They might stay the same. And I had to feel about all that as well, like the feeling that it was wrong to forgive them when they wouldn't change. You know, you imagine your own daughter or son being abused by a pedophile, and then you having to go through the process of forgiveness. You come out the other end of the process of forgiveness knowing that you've forgiven the person, you're in a state of happiness and joy now with that person, but they still might abuse another child. You have to have gotten rid of a lot of emotion to do that, don't you? Yeah. So this is where it's a very, like, God puts us through sincere processes. They can't be processes that we manufacture. They have to be sincere processes. So we need to acknowledge that each process is a sincere process that we need to go through. And this is a process that we're going to need to go through with regard to almost everything that we feel hurt about. Yeah. So, you know, when your wife rejects you sexually, yeah, there's a whole process you're going to have to go through to forgive her. When your husband just comes home and expects you to go to bed with him, there's a whole process you're going to have to go through to forgive him. When it's happened year after year after year after year after year, there's going to be a fair few processes to go through to forgive him. Can you see that? Because there's all this stored up emotion about that. And this is why most people in their relationships are not close with each other. Because there's so much stored up emotion that it's like a great big wall between two people. Right? And unless the release of emotion occurs, unless this process occurs, of forgiveness occurs, the stored up emotion between those two people will just be like a barrier, a constant barrier, dictating the rest of their life. And you could think of forgiveness as sort of wiping away the barrier. But remember, the barrier is emotional. It's based on what's going on inside of your soul. It's not an intellectual place. It's a place that you truly feel. And to do that, you're going to have to sincerely go through some emotions and release them and get rid of them out of yourself. And it takes courage to choose that process. Because a lot of people will tell you that process doesn't work. A lot of people will tell you that it's not, you know, it's not right, that you should forgive somebody when they're still doing the same thing wrong. They'll tell you all sorts of things. They'll tell you to not forgive, you know, you should stay angry with them. They'll tell you all sorts of things when you go through this process, because the process is going to require some grief. You'll feel some fear, you'll feel some anger, and people will say to you, why are you doing all that for? All right, so there's a lot of judgment about all of that.